Happy Future Day and welcome to all of you. So the subject of today's talk, which may be a little bit shorter than our usual lectures because I want more time for discussion, is Future Day. Today, how can a new holiday increase public awareness of the technological singularity? So the course schedule has been modified to allow the insertion of this special lecture today when I realized that March 1st was going to be Future Day, and to facilitate our celebration of Future Day. Musical performance and dinner at the Upper Crust Cafe featuring Johnny Quasar Duo. He plays the theremin. And the theremin seems like a very futuristic instrument. You can imagine it playing during Star Trek or something like that. So we'll have a musical performance there between 4 and 5, cocktail hours and munchies, I think salad, hors d'oeuvres between 5 and 6, dinner between 6 and 7. And then, those of you who wish, we're moving and having music and munchies at Total Focus Optometry between 7:30 and 8:30. So that is the plan for the day. Now, it's quite a remarkable thing how many celebrations are all coming together. Yesterday was both Leap Day and Sadie Hawkins Day. Sadie Hawkins Day was the day, according to the Al Cap cartoon, when women were free to pursue their interest in men. They didn't have to wait for the guy to call, that you can be spontaneous and run after the guy. And it was probably most popular in the 60s and 50s, this idea of Sadie Hawkins Day. But yesterday was Sadie Hawkins Day and Leap Day. And as many of you know, my main professional interest is kidney medicine, and there's a World Kidney Day that is a week from today on March the 8th. So I went to the Leap Day celebration at Wunderbar last night, and they were quite enthusiastic. I think they were kind of an event in search of a purpose, and once they found out about the obvious connection between Leap Day and Future Day, they were quite enthusiastic, and they posed with the banners and talked about Future Day quite a bit during last night's performance. And here they are. That's Joel Crichton, who is a very talented performer who's the main musician in that Leap Day with our banner. So there are a total of 16 Future Day events that have been recorded on the various pages, and ours is the only one in Canada. That seems odd to me, but that's just how it is. So there are quite interesting events in Second Life, in the virtual world, Second Life, and in Melbourne, Sydney, Hong Kong. Berkeley has a very active one with Michael Anisimov and Rachel Haywire. Houston, Hawaii, Sao Paulo, Thanksgiving Point, Utah. I bet most of you hadn't heard of Thanksgiving Point, Utah before today, but they're having an event. Brussels, Paris, LA, Palo Alto, Washington, Carlton, Australia, I also didn't know about before today, and Wrocław, Poland. There probably are other events, but they're not on the pages. The other thing that has occurred in the last few days is the release of Peter Diamandis' book on abundance. And this is a book about the idea that we are approaching a post-scarcity world. Now, you've heard me talk quite a lot about the fact that the big problem in life is exactly the opposite of what you think. Everybody thinks that the big problem is so much to do, so little time, but actually I've been telling you it's exactly the opposite, that if you live to be 140, you don't have any plan to how you're going to fill up all that time, how you're going to reinvent yourself. Probably your fourth and fifth job will be jobs that don't even exist now, nobody knows about those jobs. But I think there's another challenge of the post-scarcity world that's even more shocking than what I've been telling you about in terms of you having too much time. And that is that we're all familiar with the idea of unfulfilled reality. What does that mean? It means there are things you want that you can't have, or that are very difficult. You have to make a long-range plan to get these things you want that you can't easily have. In a post-scarcity world, we're facing the possibility that that is not the case. That the things you want you can have, and so what then? If your whole life is oriented about getting the things that you want, and suddenly you can have what you want, what are you going to do next? So that is part of the idea of the post-scarcity world. And how would that come about? Well, through artificial intelligence and many of the other things we're talking about. The things that are scarce today might be quite easily obtained in the future, creating sort of utopia. Now, we've also talked about existential risks and all the things that could wipe out everybody on the planet and so on. So there's obviously a balance between these two things. But it's just as valid to talk about the challenge of the post-scarcity world. What will we do when we don't have to work, when robots are able to do almost everything that humans do today, and so on? It's a very interesting challenge. And right now, the way we fill up our time has a lot to do with things we have to do. And the plans we make those plans have a great deal to do with the fact that most of the things we want are extremely difficult to obtain. So if you change those parameters, it makes for a world remarkably different from what we have today. So we've been trying to stimulate interest in these ideas of future changes, and one way to do that is to create a new holiday. It's a much simpler construct than the idea of trying to explain to somebody what the singularity is when they may not care. They may not know what the word means, but they also don't want to know what the word means, and so things sort of stop there. Whereas people are naturally interested in the future. And they're interested in the future no matter whether they believe in a linear future or a cyclical future or karma, the idea of you being in a kind of matrix where karma extends 7 generations back, 7 generations forward. Things that happen to you may relate to distant things that happen to family members. Even in those scenarios, one is still interested in the future. So I think you can find a sort of commonality between all people by trying to celebrate the future that you could not so easily find if you wanted to have Singularity Day or Transhumanism Day or something. You'd lose a lot of people right away because they don't know what the word means, and maybe to some extent they don't want to learn. Whereas the future seems like a more natural thing. But how are we going to make this work? It will only work if it's a product of broad dialogue within society, and in a sense, that's what's happening today. It's quite exciting to think that this is the day when this is all beginning. What should we shoot for here? How many people could we reach? How many people might be interested? Well, I think one way you can judge that is by looking at the very successful TV program, The Big Bang Theory, because 16 million people in the US alone and about 30 million worldwide watch that program regularly. You cannot learn any science from it. As a matter of fact, if you want to guarantee in an evening that you won't learn any science, you can watch that program, and once again, you won't learn any science. But still, it touches on the areas. It uses the terms that we use, and so it's exactly in the same areas that we're talking about in this course. It's just not serious. It's sort of the court jester approach to life. But if you think back to the Middle Ages, the court jester at that time was a very important functioning part of the court, bringing up many important issues that could not be raised any other way. Maybe that's what the Big Bang Theory is doing, but I think we could think about reaching that many people. For a holiday to be successful, it must have visuals, it must have pageantry, it must have ceremony, it must have something to make it memorable. Otherwise, it isn't anything really. It's just something that you pretended was a holiday and really wasn't. So we've been trying to think of where to find models or metaphors for visually interesting things that are a bit unusual. And the Holi Festival, coming largely from the Asian subcontinent, is one such set of visual images. This is a holiday there where they sprinkle each other with brightly colored pigments. And we don't do anything like this in our culture. And originally, it was completely benign because all these pigments came from plants and they were non-toxic. Of course, it's hard to find brightly colored pigments from plants. And so, eventually they started using pigments from paint factories and they were toxic. And so you've got now eye injury and skin injury and lung problems and all sorts of things coming from these pigments. But you could think of going back to a scenario where it would be safe. But this gives you one idea of what it looks like. I was trying to think of what other things would be like that. Those of you who've visited my Facebook page know that forever I've only had one poem there. And just by accident, it's been this one. It's called the Crayola Bomb. As our next secret weapon, maybe we should develop a Crayola bomb, a happiness weapon, a beauty bomb. And every time a crisis developed, we would launch one. It would explode high in the air, explode softly, and send thousands, millions of little parachutes into the air, floating down to earth, boxes of Crayolas, and we wouldn't go cheap either. Boxes of 64 with a sharpener built right in with silver and gold and copper and magenta and peach and lime and amber and umber and all the rest. And people would smile and get a funny look on their faces and cover the world with imagination. So that gives you sort of the same idea of the panoply of colors. Probably also we need poetry and song. And so that song, round like a circle in a spiral, like a wheel within a wheel, never ending or beginning, on an ever-spinning reel, like a snowball down a mountain or a carnival balloon, like a carousel that's turning, running rings around the moon, like a clock whose hands are sweeping past the minutes of its face. The world is like an apple, whirling silently in space like the circles that you find in the windmills of your mind. Now, if humans were an inbred species, you would all feel the same about that song and those lyrics. You would all either like it or you wouldn't, but because we're not an inbred species, to some of you, that song and its lyrics are absolutely meaningless, and to others, it's deeply moving, and you would find the whole spectrum. But I think if we searched, we could find some poetry and some songs that seem to fit future day.